Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, and if you're new to this series, we built this 5-acre pond over the past year, and it took us several months to get all of the dirt excavated, and we had to bring in several truckloads of clay, and we also built an island, a dock, and got all the structure in place, and then it took a couple of months to get it full of water. After that, we stocked it with a bunch of bait fish, including bluegills and threadfin shad, and not long after that, we stocked it with these little 2-inch aggressive bass. And we're going to be giving you an update on them here in just a minute and showing you how big they've gotten. But before we get into that, we've got a lot of exciting things going on at the pond this week. The fish truck is coming and we're going to be stocking more bait fish. We also have a big watershed and drainage project that we're getting installed this week. But the most exciting news is that spawning season is in full swing, and not only are the bass spawning, but the bluegills are as well. So we're going to fly the drone around and check out some of the nesting sites. And bluegills are colonal nesters, so typically when you see one nest, you'll see dozens right there in the same area. And basically everywhere we put out the pea gravel, you'll see the bluegills are using that to spawn. And a lot of times in this area, the bass will spawn in late March, and the bluegills spawn during the first full moon in April. Well, that came in early April this year, so there's a lot of competition for bedding sites and spawning fish everywhere. And Alcatraz Island was one of the key spawning grounds for the bluegills. You can see they've almost surrounded it. And we got a bass moving into a shallow pocket, and they like to look for those hard bottom areas to spawn on, just like the bluegills like to use the pea gravel. And if you pay close attention, you can see those little black dots are actually the bluegills. Usually you'll see them right in the center of the nest. And it looks like they think the drone is one of those ospreys. And the prawn pond is doing great. We'll be giving you an update on that here in a minute. And you can see here we got another one of those shallow road beds they're using. So it's a really good sign that the fish are all healthy and happy. But I'm going to be trying out a new product this year that I think is really cool. And I think it could be used by either the bass or the bluegill. And you start off by just filling this circular area up with pea gravel. But the really unique part about this design is that it's a raised bed, and they've cut these small holes in the bottom section of it, so all of those newly hatched fry, right after they're born, they can escape from all the predators and go hide up under their nest. And I think that's a genius idea because, as most of you know, a really, really small percentage of all of these newly hatched fry will actually survive long enough to even make it an inch in length. So I'll be excited to see how that turns out, and we're basically just going to take some of this leftover pea gravel and get some of these set up in those shallow flats. So I got them set out in what look like some of these nice spawning areas by some of the laydowns in this shallow pocket, and it did not even take a day before the bass started taking interest. You can see one of the bass sitting right there to the right of it, and you can even see what looks to be a small male bass locked in on the bed already. Kind of looks like he's been fanning the gravel out a little bit, trying to get it just like he wants it. And over here in another area of the pond, another bass locked in on it, so it looks like the bass are going to use these more than the bluegills. But as I was just mentioning, the bass are always going to look for that hard bottom to spawn on. And one of the bass chose one of the underwater lights as a potential nesting site. Might look like a good idea during daytime. Definitely not the best spot to choose for a nest. So we were lucky enough to have some clear water, and this is going to give us a really close look at one of the nesting sites. So you can see it started off with a male and female, and they created a bed right beneath that log. And it's really stressful on both of the fish. The female has to come in and lay the eggs. And as you'll see here, it's up to the male to guard the fry for the first couple of weeks until they're old enough to swim on their own. And one of the biggest predators of those small bass fry are bluegills. So you'll see them even work together in small groups to get the bass to chase them off, and then others will sneak in and raid the nest. But it is an exciting time because it was only a 50-50 chance that the bass even spawn this year. First of all, they have to be big enough to do it, and luckily several of the females kind of fattened up over the winter. But the other interesting fact about these tiger bass is that all of the bass that we initially stocked in the pond are called F1 tiger bass, and that's first generation. So each time the bass spawn in the pond, they create a new generation of bass, so all of the bass fry this year will be called F2s, and then you'll get F3s out of next year's spawn, and so on. And the reason that the biologists track that is because the initial strain of bass that we put in the pond was an exact 50-50 split between a northern bass and a Florida bass. So 50% of the genetics came from a northern male, which are really aggressive fish, and then the other 50% came from a Florida female, which can be sometimes called a lazy fish, but they get really big in size. So if you get that 100% pure Florida strain and 100% northern bass, when you breed those two together, that creates that aggressive F1 tiger bass. And this will be my first time experimenting with these, but from what I've heard, each generation after the first can potentially lose some of those characteristics. So they may not be as aggressive or they may not get as big. So the goal for this pond will be to keep as many of the F1 strain in here as possible. And then potentially after around the third spawn, we may have to start removing some of the bass so the pond doesn't get overcrowded. And today's video is brought to you by Factor. And for those of you that have watched my channel over the past several years, you know how much I love to cook. But I have to admit, when you have those busy days where you're spending all your time on projects, there's nothing better than coming home to a pre-cooked, healthy meal. But the first thing that impressed me about Factor is their meal selections, because they have a lot of the types of food I like to eat. Steak, chicken, fish, vegetables. But one thing I really like is they typically add some sort of sauce or different cheeses, and will sometimes even spice it up. And Factor even offers meals for different types of diets, including keto, low calorie, or vegetarian. And they have over 27 different meal options each week. And a typical meal plan will range from 4 to 18 meals per week. And you can even add or reduce that number based on your specific needs. And one of the best parts is there's no prep work or mess to clean up. And since the meals aren't frozen, all you have to do is spend about 2 minutes heating them up, and it's time to eat. So if you're interested in checking them out, either click the link in my video description or head over to go.factor75.com and use my code POG-BAMA-APRIL50 for 50% off your first box. And for a little added bonus, they also send out smoothies or keto shakes, which are a perfect little snack for days out here at the pond. Gotta love it. So the fish truck just showed up, and we're going to be stocking about 8,000 adult threadfin shad today. And I want you to pay close attention to how big these are compared to the initial threadfins that we put in last year. Here's a clip of those we stocked initially, and you can tell these are a good bit bigger. But there was one big reason that I wanted some bigger shad put in for this particular time of year, and it's because the shad spawn is about to occur during the first full moon in May. And so if I put a lot of smaller shad in, there's a good chance that all the aggressive tiger bass would eat as many as they possibly could, and that would leave fewer to spawn. But since these are the adult size, there's a good chance that more of them will make it to the spawning season. And then after that shad spawn, we could even quadruple our numbers in here, and all of those new shad will be the perfect feeding size for these bass. So I'm really looking forward to next month, because that shad spawn is one of the coolest times of the year if you like topwater fishing, because the shad will spawn on hard objects, and a lot of times they'll even jump out of the water on tree limbs and things like that to lay their eggs. Well, when they group up like that at the surface, they're just an easy target for those bass, and usually it's right after the bass are recovering from the spawn, so they're really hungry, the temperatures are warm, and it's what I like to call bulking season. They're trying to put that weight back on. But here's a good look at a couple of them to see their size. And several of these are going to be stunned when you first put them in the water, so they make an easy target. And right on cue, the bass are out there busting them out in front of the dock. So maybe not as many of these are going to make it as I thought. But if you've ever dealt with threadfins, you know they are a finicky fish. They're one of the hardest to keep alive and transport. You got to keep the oxygen just perfect. The temperatures have to be right, and even then, a lot of them still may not survive through the night. And nothing triggers a bass more than that wounded shad circling on the top. Probably going to see a lot of topwater action today. But look who else decided to join in on the easy meal today. A newly hatched turtle. Probably the first shad he's ever tasted. So it looks like the turtles and bass weren't the only ones stopping by for an easy meal. And this is something you don't see every day. Crows eating shad. And we actually even have them flying down and snagging that easy meal right off the surface. That's one happy crow. So here's one tip I wanted to share with you pond owners. If you're not sure how many bait fish you have in your pond, you got a couple different options. One of them is to electroshock the pond and all the bait fish will float up to the surface. But what I chose to do this time was to walk around the pond's edge at night with a spotlight because this time of year they like to move out of that deep water and into those shallower pockets. So it's really easy to see how many of them you have. And not only that, you can see what size they are. And you obviously want them to grow and be healthy, and that's one of the main reasons we fertilize the pond, is to create that plankton bloom. And when the threadfins feed on the bloom, they become bigger, and when the bass eat them, that means they'll become bigger. So now it's time to give you an update on some of the wild animals. You can see we got a cormorant swimming around back there in the back, and the juvenile bald eagle sitting on top of the duck house, and it looks like he's going in for one of those spawning bluegills hanging out right there around the island. And I've seen this happen a few times, and I always think that the eagle catches a fish, and they're basically trying to drag it back to the bank, but every time they get back, they're empty-handed. So I'm guessing that maybe once the eagles dive down into the water, they can't flap their wings enough to get them back up out of the water, so they basically just swim back to the bank. But the juvenile is the eagle that hangs around the pond the most. He knows there's a lot of fish in here, he just hadn't quite figured out how to catch them. So if you were following the channel last spring, you'll recognize these two. They're our pair of whistling ducks, and they're the only pair of ducks that have actually had babies. So last year they hatched 10 baby ducks, and they successfully raised them out here in the pond and kept them away from all the eagles and owls and other predators. And eventually they got to where they could fly, and they stayed around the pond for about a month, and then they found a new home. But you can tell they're back with one major thing on their mind, and that's finding a new nesting site. Well, if you'll notice, the hole that's on that duck house was drilled out really small, and that's because it was made for wood ducks. And wood ducks can be a good bit smaller. And with duck houses, you want to drill the holes as small as possible to keep the bigger predators like the eagles and owls out. But you can see this pair is determined to make this their new nesting site. But no matter how much they try, they're just not going to be able to fit in. So you know what that means? Now I got to build another duck house for this pair. And not to mention, that probably isn't the best duck house location because that's where the eagle hangs out every morning. So I would not recommend having a bunch of baby ducks in that spot. But I thought this was a really interesting clip because pay attention to the crow that is pestering the juvenile eagle. Even though crows are only half the size of an eagle, I see it all the time where they're basically chasing off the bigger birds. And it's just funny to watch. Look who's deciding to use the eagle tower that we built. One of the ospreys that's been hanging around. So I would not be surprised at all if they build a nest here this fall. And I wasn't a big fan of the ospreys early on because they can be pretty deadly when it comes to fish eaters. But I have noticed that as we started fertilizing the pond and the water started getting more and more stained, and now they can't pick them off nearly as easy. But here's another clip I wanted to show you guys because we were down in the beach area and we noticed a platform that was very similar to the one we have. And as we got closer, we noticed there were some baby owls. And that's pretty promising for us because, as you all know, we have two owls that have been here with us since the beginning, Hooter and Al Capone. And we would love it if either the eagles or the owls would nest up here. And then our plan would be to mount a camera up there on top of the nest. But no matter how it goes, I'm happy that animals are starting to use the eagle tower. And looking forward to seeing what happens during nesting season. And another interesting fact, the bluegills will come off of their beds whenever the pellet feeder goes off. Even though they're spawning, they're not going to miss those protein snacks. Now for an update on the prawns, if you missed our last video, we added 5,000 prawns. We put 2,500 in this pond and 2,500 in a stock tank. And these guys are getting big. We've been feeding them 2 different types of protein pellets. One of them's the same one we feed our bluegills, and then we also got another catfish pellet that crumbles a little easier. And they seem to like them both. So the next project we're going to be working on is redirecting all of our watershed to prevent erosion. So the water's always drained off of the hillside down into a ditch that led into the pond. And when we got really heavy rains, it would start washing that area out. And since we put the new prawn pond right here in that same area, the last thing we want is a heavy rainfall to come through, flood that pond, and wash all the prawns into the big pond. So the plan is to install about a 40-foot drain, and it's basically going to be similar to a French drain, and that'll span across the length of the ditch. So we're getting started digging out the drain area this morning, And you can see the guys are out here getting the foreman boards up. We're going to be pouring the concrete tomorrow morning. And at the same time, we're digging the trench out that's going to go down to the 5-acre pond. And we're going to fill this with an 18-inch corrugated pipe. It's going to be about 100 feet of it. And we've marked off 10-foot sections because we're going to drop 2 inches in elevation every 10 feet to make sure the slope's just right to keep the water flowing down to the pond. So we got the trench dug. Now it's the fun part. It was a little bit of a struggle getting all that pipe fitted together, but the guys got it. And into the trench it goes. Alright, we got a lot done today. Everything's ready for the concrete now. And you can see this is where all the water will flow from here all the way down to the pond. And here's a good overhead look of the whole project. They're going to pour concrete in that framed wooded area, and then you can see the 100 feet of buried pipe. And I'm not sure what it is, but there's something satisfying about watching concrete and even dirt trucks unload. But we actually are in a little bit of a hurry. We got to get the concrete in place and let it set up and dry because we do have a big storm coming through tonight. And the guys made quick work of it. It turned out to be about 36 feet of drain, and they even built a lip into it so we can set a grate over the top of it. Alright folks, the drain project is done. We added some extra clay right here, a little hump, so if any water's coming down through here, it'll hit it, force it into the drain. I still have to get some grates to go over this to cover it up. To keep old George Jones the possum, I can almost guarantee you he'd fall off in there. But we added one other little sloped area right there so we can catch everything flooding down through here. All right, folks, time to tag some fish and continue on with our contest. If you're not familiar with it, each time we catch one of the bass, we scan them to see if they've already been tagged. And if not, we'll inject a new pit tag into them. They all have a unique tag so we can track them in years to come. If I think they're over a pound, we'll weigh them. But since these fish are spawning up here on the banks, I don't really want to mess with them this time of year and interrupt their spawn. So we're going to fish out deeper, out here on these deep edges, maybe around the oak throne and places like that. So hopefully we can catch some males or females that aren't really in the spawning process. Here we go. Good one. Looks like a nice female. Yeah, we got a fighter. Alright, looks like she might have been eating some shad. No tag on her. Alright, she is 5'7", 1424. And she weighs 1.16 pounds. No way. No way I got a bluegill on a lizard. I would have never in a million years thought that was possible. We're not going to worry about tagging this guy just yet. Here we go. Got him. Out there off that roadbed. Oh, a nice one. That's a pretty healthy fish right there. Maybe one of the bigger ones we've caught. Out there off a deep roadbed. Oh, and this one looks like it may have been tagged. Yep. 71-258. 71-258. 13¼ inches. And this one weighs 1.21 pounds. So not the biggest one we've caught. And all right, get her back. And one of the best parts about tagging these fish is after you catch fish that have already been tagged, you can go back and look at the data, including where they were caught, what you caught them on, how big they were. And this particular fish is named Poseidon and was caught just a couple weeks before this. And in pretty much the same vicinity of the pond. It had only moved about 50 feet. And one interesting fact is it did lose just a little bit of weight. Initially it was 1.25 pounds. Second time we caught it, it was 1.21 pounds. And I'm not that concerned with that this time of year when they're spawning. Alright, this guy is 0283. Green spot on the head. Looks like a small male. He is 12 inches. Alright, this guy is 0799. Hit it as soon as he hit the water. Little guy, hanging out off the lily pads. Now, that's going to be one of the slower growing fish for sure. 10.5 inches. And this one is 1466. Here's one. Another nice one off that roadbed. That's the hot spot. Good one. They all have the green spot right there on their head. That's a really cool mark. This one hasn't been caught. 12 3/4 inches. And this one is 69548. This fish weighs 1.12 pounds. Let her go. But here's a quick look at the updated contest list. We're tagging our first 104 bass and letting you all name them. And if we select your name, then you get put on the spreadsheet beside your fish. And if we catch your fish multiple times in the future, that'll allow you to compete for different prizes. So anywhere you see a blank spot on the list, just a letter without a name, leave a comment below. And I'm trying to pick 5 new winners each video until we finish out the list. And here's an updated list on the prizes that these fish are competing for. Alright, we're finishing this job up. Last thing I'm going to do is cut the end of that pipe off here with a chainsaw. And then I got these heavy duty tarps. They're basically pond liners that I'm going to lay down there at the base so all the water that's coming out doesn't hit that clay blanket and erode it away. Can't waste good pond structure, so I'm just going to take this right out there. They'll have another little tunnel to swim in. Alright, I just got it folded the way I like it. Just going to put it in there and put some blocks on it. Got that one started. Now we're going to add that other one out past it. Alright, we just sunk it right here at the end of the tunnel. I'm happy with the way this project turned out, and I can honestly say over the past couple years, I've seen firsthand how much damage water can do. But hopefully this is going to put an end to all of that. And now it's time for one of those clips. As a pond owner, you just hate to see it. But it is a little educational, so I wanted to show it to you all. So you'll notice the flock of geese in the background, but pay close attention to the fish-eating cormorant swimming around the oak throne. And a couple things I want to point out about this. Watch when he goes underwater, and when you see the bubbles rip across the surface, that shows you just how fast a cormorant can be. And it looks like he caught up to one of the big bluegills. But the reason I wanted to show this to you all is for a couple reasons. And one of them is that they can eat fish that are up to 3 pounds. So even the bass in this pond won't be safe for the next couple of years. And then the next thing that you could see in this video is how fast they are. So pretty much, if a flock of them flew into your pond, they can wipe it out in a short amount of time. So any of you pond owners out there, if you put a lot of time and energy into your fish like we have, you want to keep the cormorants out of the pond as much as you possibly can. And the one good thing about this is they don't like being around people. So the more you're out there and active around your pond, the less cormorants you'll have. But that is just part of nature. The eagles, the ospreys, and the cormorants are all going to eat the fish. The one thing I hate about it, though, is that the cormorants can catch and eat the adult fish. And all of the oak trees that we planted last month are doing great. They've bloomed out and got their leaves, except for one of them right in the middle. For some reason, that oak thinks that it's fall and its leaves should be red. Any of you tree guys out there, let me know if there's something I should do when you have an oak tree with red leaves during the spring. It's that time of year to start doing some cutting, so we're basically cutting back some of that winter ryegrass that we planted and baling it for hay. And you can see it started out that high. Then we got it cut and baled, and hopefully some of the cows in this area are going to be happy when they get to eat on this. Alright, time to feed the aggressive tiger. Let's see if he is hungry or not. Ow! He's definitely hungry. But this may be the last time you see him eating in this tank, because I've already ordered a transfer tank that we're going to use to transport Bonnie and Clyde out to the 5-acre pond. And we've been waiting on both the backyard pond and the 5-acre pond water temps to get really close together, and they finally have, so as long as we don't get any crazy weather, you'll be seeing Bonnie and Clyde moved to the Crimson Oak Pond in our next video. And now it's time to feed Mr. Moby. Alright folks, that is going to wrap up this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button to follow along with all the pond builds and wild animals we have out here at the farm. But I hope y'all enjoyed this one, and we will see you all next time.